Zen is a Chinese concept which comes from a Sanskrit root meaning absorption, with a broader purpose when applied to things in general of observing things as they are for understanding. With this in mind, one can investigate the movement of water within trees. So let's take a close look at the individual elements which compose the water molecule, specifically the elements of hydrogen and oxygen, as found in probably one of the greatest pattern-seeking accomplishments of humankind, the periodic table of the elements. The table is arranged in columns and rows. Columns represent elements which have similar properties. Horizontally, from left to right, the elements increase in their reactivity. Notice hydrogen is circled in red in the upper left, and oxygen is circled on row 2 on the right. They're both a light yellow, which means they are very reactive. Oxygen is extremely reactive, and there's only one other element that's more active in the entire universe, and that's fluorine. Hydrogen has some interesting characteristics. It is the simplest and probably the oldest of all elements. It's composed of one neutron and one proton in the nucleus and one electron orbiting it. Normally, hydrogen would be more stable if there were 2 electrons in the orbit, but it only has 1. Oxygen, in turn, has 8 electrons, 6 of which are in the outer orbit, and oxygen would be more stable if it had 8 elements in the outer orbit. The interaction of electrons between different elements, that's the basis of all chemical reactions. Finally, it's very important to understand that the interaction of electrons between these elements is the basis of all types of matter in the universe. Let's take a look at how water bonds with each other. This graphic shows the hydrogen element on the left with 1 electron in the outer orbit, but it needs 2 to be stable. And on the right, you can see the oxygen element with its 8 protons, 6 of which are on the outer orbit, but it needs 2 to be stable. Now, if we take a look at the actual structure of a water molecule, you'll see that this problem of needing electrons is solved by sharing electrons. On the left, you see the oxygen atom with 2 hydrogen atoms. And where the 2 orbits meet, that's where they're sharing their electrons. It is in this configuration that the water molecule becomes very stable. But it also becomes very polar because if you look on the left-hand side, there's a very low density of electrons, so it's somewhat positive. But on the left-hand side, it has a lot of electrons and it becomes negative. If you take a look at the graphic of the hydrogen molecule on the right, you can see what this does. It makes a single molecule which is polarized. They call it a polar molecule, and one side is very negative and the other side is, I wouldn't say very, but it's negative, and the other side is positive. This is the basis for what is called hydrogen bonding. Hydrogen bonding is basically an electrostatic attraction between the positive and negative poles. And when the water molecules start linking together, this is what forms typical liquid water. Now that we understand the internal structure of a water molecule, which results in its polar nature, one is ready to investigate the 4 main characteristics of water movement in trees. Now, going from the base of the tree soil upwards, it's necessary to take a look at the various forces which move water up the tree. These are cohesion, osmosis, adhesion, and transpiration. We're going to first take a closer look at cohesion, the electrostatic traction. So take a look at the four water molecules and see how they're arranged. If you look close, you'll see the positive and negative charges are aligned. And this can go on and on and on to make very, very huge chains, uninterruptible change with this electrostatic bonds between each molecule. It's this cohesion of water molecules that plays a significant part in water movement in trees. It is, in essence, what makes water stick together. Cohesion also gives water a high boiling point and also surface tension. A great example of surface tension is the water strider. The water strider walks on water, and the only reason he can walk on water is because water sticks together due to cohesion. The next phenomena is osmosis. Osmosis is the water movement across a membrane. It's the main mechanism in which water, a solvent, enters tree roots. Osmosis describes the motion of water across a membrane. The outer tissue of the tree roots is essentially a semi-permeable membrane. The inside roots have a high concentration of ionic solutions known as solutes. The solutes inside the roots have a slight electrical charge and they generate a force against each other, and thus they create a repelling force. Since the solutes are electrically charged, they tend to repel each other and they must draw water from across the root membranes in order to increase the distances between each other. This is the basis for osmosis. So the high concentration of solutes inside the root cells pulls the cohesive water molecules from the surrounding soil into the tree roots. Characteristic of water is adhesion. Adhesion is one of the main mechanisms in which water moves up inside the tree xylem tubes. Since water molecules are polar in nature, they tend to attract other unlike substances such as tissue lining in the tree xylem. The water adhesion inside the tree functions like a ladder and provides support for the column of water above each adhesion point. The adhesion decreases the weight of the water in the column by transferring the water column weight to the tissue. This in turn reduces the pressure of the water column at the base of the tree. Adhesion allows the water molecules to stick to the plant tissue, which helps transport water to the leaves. Both cohesion and adhesion combine forces to create a unique force known as cohesion tension. It is the main method of water transport in trees. So you can see that in this graphic, both adhesion and cohesion are friends, and they work together to move water up a tree. Our next feature is transpiration. Is the evaporation of water from trees, which is the main mechanism to assist in the movement of water within the tree. And it also cools the leaves when the water departs from the leaves. The rate of water leaving the leaf is controlled by the stomata, small openings on the leaves which are controlled by guard cells, which regulate the rate of water evaporation. The stomata open and close based upon environmental conditions such as light, heat, and drought. When water evaporates from the leaves through the stomata, the adhesive forces between water molecules and the xylem walls help maintain a continuous column of water, pulling more water upwards to replace what was lost. Water moves through trees with the assistance of four significant forces. 1. Cohesion between water molecules sticking them together. 2. Osmosis at the roots absorbing water. 3. Adhesion of water to xylem tissue providing water column support. And finally 4. Transpiration of water molecules as the leaves pulling up the water. This concludes the presentation of water movement in a tree. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Thanks for watching.